order the meeting of the Planning Commission for Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. Clerk, may I have a roll call?
Chairperson,
Here.
Vice Chair Lloyd, Commissioner Borders, Commissioner DeChristopher, Commissioner Kilgore,
Present.
Commissioner Cron,
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you. And Commissioner Perry, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. The public at this time is invited to comment and discuss any topic that's relevant to or within the authority of this public body. You are limited to 3 minutes, and if you'd like to come forward, please come in, sign in, state your name, push the little button till it turns green, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes. Denny.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. I want to start my moment in the clock light to apologize. I think I owe you all an apology, not for necessarily what I said, but the way I said it. And I also would like to say that I appreciate your efforts. I tried very hard to get the information that you all had available to you, and I would have taken months to have gone through it. And you all had a big task in front of you. And I appreciate that, and the fact that you've all showed up after being put through all that, and plus. So thank you. I do want to suggest that I feel communication is very important for this community, and I'm glad to see the communities out tonight to be part of this. I am disappointed that 6A is even on here. I think while we're doing work on the master plan, no special permits should be allowed. And things get settled down and we know where we are, then those type of considerations could be made. I also feel that plain language, when it can be used, should be. I know there's times for legal terms and such, and then also the use of letters instead of the full terms that are involved, acronyms, should be limited. And each time you're going to start something, you should start it with the actual thing and then break it down during the conversation. I would make it easier for myself and I think others. I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Is there any other further comment, public comment? Seeing none?
No, excuse me.
Oh. Certainly. Would you like to do public comment?
I would.
Please come forward.
Can you get up okay?
I can.
Okay.
Just let- there we go.
Get me out of the way.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, please sign in, and I think the green button is on. And state your name.
Am I pushing the right button? I can't, I'm colorblind and I can't tell. My name's Bruno Bielant. I live on 2732 Bedford. I'm a bit concerned about the request to build a almost 1,600 square foot building on Skyview Court. And the reason why, I have a few reasons why I'm concerned. We originally, historically, when the project was being planned.
Excuse me,
went
Mr. Bruno, is this regarding the first item?
I
I think it is, the guest house.
Yes.
Okay, just for the benefit of the entire audience, and I'm sorry to interrupt. what happens is as the commission considers each of the items on the agenda, including the guest house that's proposed on Skyview Court, they will then call for public comment on that particular item.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
No, that's okay. It wasn't explained, I don't think. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're welcome to speak now, or you can speak when they consider that item. It's typically done when they're considering the item.
Then I'll go along with the typical,
Okay.
okay?
And now is a time where if anybody has anything else that's under the purview of the commission, as Mr. French just did, but isn't on the agenda, you have a chance to just talk to them. But if you want to wait for your agenda item and talk to them about that, then there will be a chance to do that.
Sorry, everyone.
No, I wasn't clear, so I apologize. Okay. We'll see you in a few minutes. For possible action, the approval of the minutes for the August 30th, 2023 workshop and the approval of the minutes for the September 27th, 2023 workshop. Do you want to take them together?
Can we actually take those separate, because I have to abstain from the September as I was not present?
Okay, we can do that one. Okay, let's look at the August 30th. Are there any changes or additions?
Madam Chairman, which one are we talking about?
August 30th, 2023, the Planning Commission workshop minutes,
No, I have no changes on that.
right? Can I take a motion, please?
Motion to accept the minutes of the August 30th workshop.
Second? Okay, thank you, Commissioner DeChristopher. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? Approved. Okay. Now we'd like to look at the approval of the minutes for the September 27th, 23, Planning Commission minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I might, on page 5, and I don't know if this was something I said, because I know Tamar basically quotes from the minutes, but it says Commissioner Cron believed that SF 2100 was too much for the site. So I don't know if I actually said that, which I might have, or I said 1200, or I said 2100 or 21,000. So just a clarification, Tamar, if you could look at that when you get a minute.
Definitely, I'll correct that.
I don't know if it's a correction. I may have said that, and I know you and
Well,
I've
it
had.
doesn't matter. We'll
Oh,
fix it.
okay.
What do you want to say?
Oh, let's see. No, let's see. Yeah, I think it was 1200, SF 1200.
Okay, I'll fix that for you. Sorry.
Okay. Any other changes? Commissioner Lloyd, you're abstaining on this one? Okay, great. Seeing no more changes, can I have a motion, please?
Madam Chairman, I move to accept the September 27th minutes as amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Borders. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Going on, meeting items. Meeting item number 6A, LU 2020, 2023-0379 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a request from Tom Metcalf, applicant, to modify and approve special use permit, SUP LU 2022-0397, to allow for the construction of an accessory structure with a cumulative square footage totaling 5.44% of the parcel space size on a property zone single-family residential, 1 acre planned unit development, SF 1A-P, located at 2659 Skyview Court, assessor parcel number APN 007-67109.
Good evening, Heather Banzo for the record. So many of you will remember that there was a special use permit that was brought forward for this project within the last year. And what the SUP was for a guest building with an attached garage. What we found out when the applicant was going through the building permit process is while the building elevations showed a covered entryway to the front door that's 100 square feet, it wasn't included in the calculations for square footage that were provided in the application. So when the planning commission approved this request, it didn't include that coverage that is over the entryway. So with that extra coverage, it would have triggered the 5% rule on a property that's zoned SF1A. So this triggers an additional review by the planning commission simply because the square footage was missing from the overall calculation. So with that, it does trigger the 5% rule that's in our code for accessory structures. And on this, I really highlighted the two things that changed. So number one, it triggered the special use permit for the entryway, so 100 square feet at that entryway. And then while the applicant is going through the process again, they did add 2 foot of width to the garage just to get a little bit of extra room once you pull into the garage for opening doors and storage. So those are the only two changes that are before you today. The guest building has been approved. The residence is under construction. And then with that, we do have some recommended modifications to the conditions of approval associated with this request. So the applicant is available to answer any questions, and I'm happy to at the appropriate time as well. But staff is recommending approval of this request. Thank you.
Heather, can you please explain what the additional conditions of approval that you're added?
So condition number 7 is just a restatement of the same message to change the language to make it a little bit easier for the layman to understand. So before they can get a certificate of occupancy for the guest house, they've got to get a C of O for the main house. Because guest buildings are an accessory use, they can't be established on their own. They've got to be associated with that finalized single-family residence. And then on condition number 8, it's just an update to the square footage of the accessory structure. And then condition number 9 is new. And what this is the guest building is what triggered the special use permit. However, the accessory structure standards allow for a little bit more square footage than the guest building standards. So it's kind of a 2-part thing. If the applicant chooses to move forward with like a storage shed or something on the property, it may trigger an administrative review if that square footage is between 50% and 75% of the primary residence, or a special use permit if it exceeds 75% of the primary residence. So that's why it was broken down the way it does. So it speaks to our code in terms of process.
Okay, and I have one other question. This is the one that came before us because it was a little bit larger because it used the special insulating materials?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So we know that we're still talking about the same building.
Yes.
Okay, great. May I have the applicant come up, please?
It's still green. Hi, Tom Metcalf, applicant.
Okay.
I should have paid more attention when we gave the preliminary plans over a year ago. We did have a covered porch, but the plans weren't as mature as they should have been, or as they could have been. They were mature at the time. So obviously, not obviously, but we have plans in for permit. This is where this was caught. And we did change from the original application, like Ms. Monzo said, the request for the additional 44 square feet in the garage. And it really wasn't as much to get more storage. We had miscommunicated with the architect to put a 9-foot garage door in. And my wife already has a 9-foot garage in our existing home, and she's got 2 scrapes on her car. And we just wanted a 10-foot garage door for a single car. And structurally, it was better to add 2 square feet than try to beef up the structure for a 10 square foot. I know I'm getting into the weeds. I apologize. So that's what it was about.
Okay. Is there any discussion of the board? Any questions that you have of the applicant?
I had one for staff and the applicant, if I might.
Of course,
Okay.
Commissioner Cron.
Heather, just real quick, when you're talking about the percentage that you're over, it's at 5% that this kicks in, correct? So realistically, we're only talking like about 0.5% of what really triggered this, correct? Yeah, it's just
Very small, but enough to
enough to
trigger
trigger it.
this review, yes.
Okay, no, that's not a problem. The other question I had had to do with page 4 or 5. It had to do with, in the staff report, it talks about being consistent with the architecture of the primary resident and is accessory structure to the primary residence. So basically, you're saying you want the two buildings to match, correct? Materials, labor, all that?
That's correct, and that's what's been proposed as well.
Okay. I guess then maybe for Tom, the question would be is, would you mind an additional condition that actually would be condition 10, basically stating that they would match?
Well, I hope so.
Okay.
I don't think we'd want them not to match.
It's just one of the things, it's
Sure.
just that
Sure.
I have great hope and expectation that they would match, but I just think for the record, I think it's always nice to be able to say that
You bet.
it's out there. Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Perry?
Thank you, Mr. Metcalf, for coming in this evening. I recall this one a couple of years ago, so I'm going to probably ask a similar question, if not the same one, because I remember when this body approved that 12-acre subdivision up there in a meeting where there was lots of folks. And one of the things I remember about it is that there is an HOA, right?
I'm the president of the HOA
Okay.
now. I wasn't when I came here a year ago.
Okay. And does that HOA have CCNRs associated with it for the 12?
Absolutely. In fact, before I bought the property and the other 8 people that have purchased out of 12, which I think says a lot for the subdivision, we all got copies of the CCNRs from the developer and had to adhere to those CCNRs.
And in those CCNRs, are there any prohibitions to a second home on a single lot?
No, sir, it defers to the SF1 code of the city.
Okay.
It does have a very strict, I shouldn't say strict, but very clear guidelines on types of buildings, design-wise, farm, ranch, Tahoe, Tuscan, modern versions thereof, no modern homes allowed. The developer put that very succinctly in. And so far, we've all adhered, obviously we have to adhere to them. So it's a very robust HOA and an architectural review committee within the HOA.
But no prohibitions on a second building? Like
No,
this,
sir.
a second dwelling?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lloyd?
This question or statement, I guess, is just for clarifying for the public. But, in my mind, special is not necessarily an exemption, but it's more appropriate to say that it's a specific use. So in code, we are saying that a special use permit has there's a specific use outlined there that we're saying you have to do this in code. So it's not that they're getting a special exemption and they're being treated differently than anyone else would, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we did have a workshop several months ago that covered exactly that topic. So a special use permit is a planning term, and it literally just is an additional part of our code that covers things that are discretionary reviews that go to a planning commission before you can get a building permit. So this is an allowed use within the zoning district, but it requires that it go before the planning commission before it can actually be constructed. So you're right, nothing special, it's just process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Borders?
Heather, on condition number 7, when you explained it by reading what was stricken out. I thought prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy for the guest building, a C of O for the primary residence will be issued, was very clear. The other is not, to me.
I don't disagree with you. A different staff person prepared the staff report and I wasn't available, so they wrote it up in a term that they thought made sense.
Well, I don't think it makes sense at all.
Either way works fine for me.
All right, the other question I have is if we don't approve this, what happens?
If we don't approve this, they'd have to modify their roof plan to eliminate that covered entryway, and the garage would have to remain the same, so his wife's gonna be dinging up the vehicle in the garage. So essentially, you couldn't have the extra 2 feet on the side of the garage, and that covered entry would go away.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Lloyd?
I have one more question for Mr. Metcalf. Terry had mentioned, Commissioner Preston had mentioned the special insulation, and that's why it's like thicker. Can you just briefly talk about that? I believe there's a fire prevention piece to that too. Is that correct?
That is, I'll try to go to the short version. Insulated concrete forms, or ICF is the terminology in construction. They are typically 12 inches thick for an exterior wall, and they consist of 3 inches of styrofoam on the inside and the outside with 6 inches of concrete and rebar in between. So I would term it as a Lego block filled with concrete. And then there's actually ABS, which is a plastic that is vacuum formed into the styrofoam that holds them together that you can actually use as studs. Not only is it a huge fire resistant, which is important around here, but the R value is double of what a typical home is. You do have to sacrifice square footage. It is, or lot coverage, because it is twice as thick as a typical 2x6 wood framed wall. But the energy efficiency and the green component of the home is highly outweighs the cost, in my opinion.
Okay, Commissioner Borders? Would you like to read exactly what that number 7 is so that it's clear?
Well, I would, my suggestion was that the original wording remain and that the additional wording be removed so that it reads, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, a C of O, for the guest building, the C of O for the primary residence shall be issued. And I want to thank staff for defining what the acronym is before they used it again. And then the rest of that, I would just delete.
Okay. Commissioners? Okay.
And if I may, could I
Certainly.
ask the applicant a question? We had a pretty significant workshop last week when we talked about auxiliary dwelling units. And two of the issues that came up were the one issue was the fact that we were going to limit the size to 1,000 square feet. And the other was if it was detached, it was going to have its own sewer and water hookup.
I agree with that. We have our own sewer and water hookup. We actually have our own electrical and gas hookup. And actually, we have our own address now. And I own a property down the street that's on 2 acres with an approved SUP mother-in-law's unit. My mother passed away in it. My father aged out in it. My father lives with us now. My youngest daughter, who will be living on this lot, her husband and our 2 grandchildren live in on the building now, and so I'm getting an address for that house. I just learned this a few weeks ago.
How does that go with your HOA?
The city assigned an address, and my youngest daughter's mother-in-law is thrilled she has her own address.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions, board? Okay, great. Okay, Tom?
Can I?
Are we done?
I'm sorry, I was jumping in.
Oh.
So are you saying that there are 2 separate sewer hookups and 2 separate water hookups for your
Yes.
one lot?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And There, yes, there are. I'm trying to get in the weeds as an engineer, and I apologize.
Well, that was one of the issues that we talked about at the
Sure.
workshop it's not, it's not fair to everybody else if there's an accessory dwelling unit and they're drawing water and using the sewer and paying only for one house when they have two.
Well, and the problem there, Mr. Perry, is what if the original house wasn't sized properly to handle that extra guest house? So in one good thing is we started this from day one, so we were able to handle it with our engineers early on and with the city and everybody else.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Metcalf, do you have any problem with us changing and clarifying condition number 7?
I do not.
Terrific. So you accept all the
No,
conditions?
I'm going to build the big house first and the small house follows behind.
And so you agree to all the conditions
Yes,
of
yeah,
use?
oh, yes.
Thank
And
you.
so does my youngest daughter.
Okay, and. now
Madam
I'd like-
Chair, did that also include the condition of matching architecture styles and materials too? That I talked about?
Is that in there?
No, I'm asking for that as an additional.
Okay, you're asking
condition.
for that as an additional? Do you
Yeah,
have
if,
an-
if you could, when you make your motion, make sure to include
Yeah,
those
because
two
we still
changes.
have- We still have public comment. Okay? All righty, I'm going to ask you to step back, and we'll have some public comment, and you are limited to 3 minutes. Come on up. This is your time.
What happened last year?
This is the same approval as of last year, but we're correcting the size that had been missing.
To come to the meeting, this is basically what was approved last year, just for clarification. We're just trying to
Okay.
understand because we didn't know this was gonna be on here. This is something different?
Okay, this is item number A. This is the building that is going to back up on Bedford, cross the creek.
There's more than one, though.
Okay, so this is item A that we're talking about right now. This one was approved previously, and there was an error as far as adding the porch and extending the garage, so it increased the size.
That's not what we just got in the mail to come to this meeting.
It's this one. I think it is.
Just to clarify, because
It's,
We don't understand.
okay, just a moment. Get clarified.
is that what was last year?
This is what they're talking about right now.
Right, but was this what was already approved last year, and it's modifying that?
I'll explain.
Okay.
Do I have to push a button? Do I?
No, you're good. You've
Am I
got
good?
green. You're
Okay.
good.
Well, let me just
Can
continue.
you restate your name though?
Yeah, my
please,
name's
Frederick?
Bruno Belot.
Thank
I
you.
live at 2732 Bedford. And I've spoken to you folks before, and I have similar concerns. When we originally were speaking to the people that were going to develop the area, we spent a considerable amount of time trying to convince them to go from 24 units to 12. And it appears as though we're now going back towards a more units. We agreed with the builders or the developers that it was going to be 12 and it would maintain the integrity of the area. And now we're adding additional units on there. I'm considering that I understand that people have a right to do with their property what they wish to do. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to restrict anyone, but I am concerned. And one of my concerns is drainage in the area. And when you start putting a lot of asphalt and a lot of property construction on a particular area, then drainage becomes an issue. And I've expressed my concern about drainage before. I was reassured that there won't be any problems with the creek and so forth. But now, as we're opening the door to add additional units, then I'm going to think that it displaces water. And again, where does that water go? It can go towards the folks that live on Bedford Way, and I'm one of them, okay? Another thing that is of concern to me is that I don't understand how the taxes are are done around here, but you have another house, you have another address and so forth. I'm assuming that there's a tax bill that goes to that property, and which would be fair then, because if I have to pay on my property because of my address, then I would think that an additional address that would mean that there'd be an additional tax bill so that we're all sharing in the infrastructure and also the services that are provided in Carson City. So this was something that was brought up before. There was talk that it was going to be resolved. I'm hoping it has been resolved, and I'm hoping that the answer to that resolution is that, in fact, there are taxes on the additional address that comes with that. So I'm here to express those concerns. I'm hoping that you'll have answers for me and for my other neighbors and so forth, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We hope to answer your question. Do I have a clock? It's my fault. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, there was a question in the audience. I do have an answer if you'd like me to provide that now.
Please.
Okay. Sorry, I just put the wrong piece of paper in my book. Okay, so what's happening? A year ago, October 26, 2022, so the member of the audience was saying, well, is this what happened a year ago? Okay, what happened a year ago, October 2022, is the Planning Commission approved a special use permit to authorize this applicant to build a guest house in excess of 1,000 square feet on this property. So why are we here today if that already happened, right? The reason we're here today is twofold. One, there's this rule that says you can have 1,000 square foot guest house. So if this guest house was 1,000 square feet, he could just do it. The staff would have the authority to approve that. Because he wants a guest house that's more than 1,000 square feet, only the Planning Commission can authorize it, and only after having a public hearing and making certain findings of fact. We have this other rule that says that if you have accessory buildings, they can be garages, shops, whatever. But if you have accessory buildings that cover more than 5% of your lot, and your lot's more than 21,000 square feet, you need a special use permit. So when this was considered by the Planning Commission in October of 2022, they didn't talk about the part where it's exceeding the 5%. It's actually at 5.44%. So Commissioner Cron, I think, was asking about that percentage and trying to understand how that was working. So that was a mistake by the staff. We should have brought that here. We failed to do it. We're not going to hide it. We're going to be honest about it and say, we didn't tell you it was more than 5%. You have to look at the findings all over again. And Mr. Metcalf knows that we made that mistake. We've had that conversation with him. How did we find out we made the mistake? He applied for a building permit. So when the building permit came in, the person who was reviewing the building permit said, this is more than 5%. And they didn't get the special use permit for more than 5%. Now, in addition to that, Mr. Metcalf wants a different garage door. I don't know the details of it, but somehow that makes the building a little bit bigger. I'm not sure how much bigger, 44 square feet bigger. So he only got permission to have a certain size accessory guest building or guest building. So he has to come back to the Planning Commission and say, now my wife wants a bigger garage door, so I need another 44 square feet. So what he already got approved in October 2022 did not address the coverage of more than 5% of the lot area, and it does not cover the extra 44 square feet he's asking for. So hopefully that helps explain the difference between a year ago and today. Thank you.
Any further public comment? One of the things I did want to clarify is that we cannot answer your questions. The staff will answer your questions after you speak and we reconvene.
It's already green. My name is Kelly Belot, and my husband spoke earlier. Our concern, I guess, was that when we came last year and it was increased, we knew about the 1,000 square feet which was able to be added. Then it was increased to just under 1,200. Now we're looking at just under 1,600, no matter what the percentage is. I appreciate that he wants to increase the size of his walls and protect it from fire and all of that. I don't understand why there needed to be an increase in what was built on there. In order to do that, you just reduce the amount of square footage that you're building. And now we're here, what we said last year is give an inch, someone's gonna take a mile, someone's gonna come back and want more. And here we are again wanting more because of an oversight in some part. When is the rule going to be the rule where it's followed and it's just not allowed to be an oversight and then we continue to do this? I don't remember which commissioner last year, once it was approved, said, we need to look at this. I think it's a little ironic that all of a sudden now there are 2 addresses for 1 lot, which is exactly what my husband was mentioning, which we were trying to avoid based on traffic, based on the possibility of flooding in that area, based on the creek and the design of building the berm on their side of the creek, not on our side of the creek, and the engineers saying that all of this would be protected, and they quoted that, and we want that mentioned in case our place ever floods, that they said we would be protected. We don't know. Now they're putting an additional house basically on the lot, and my understanding last year was it was a mother-in-law quarters, not a guest house. And now someone else's wife is going to park in the guest house, which is the mother-in-law quarters. I mean, it's very confusing, and people can do, like my husband said, what they want, but when is the rule to be followed? And that's, I guess, what we're concerned about. And when is the other people, once they start building, what if they come and say, well, I'd like mine to be 1,700 square feet? When is enough enough? When is it going to be, we need to follow the rules here? So, thanks.
Yes. Tom Metcalf again. I'd like to clarify something. What I said was the existing home that my wife and I live in, my wife parks in a 9-foot garage door. She has scrapes on our car from the 9-foot garage door. My youngest daughter's mother-in-law, who will be residing in this house as always planned, from the time we came up with this inception, she's a few years older than us, and she wanted a 10-foot door. We made a mistake on this design by initially having the architect design it as a 9-foot door. This is a mother-in-law's unit. It's always been planned. The other thing I'd like to say is I have spent thousands of dollars on these 3 properties working with the civil engineer and the city public works to make sure that all drainage on our properties drained to Skyview Court with very little impact to Ash Canyon Creek. And when I mean very little impact, we actually have specified swales on our property that divert all the water to Skyview Court that goes into an engineered drainage system that we had to cut across, the developer, had to cut across Longview from west to east. So all the water from our 12 lots actually discharges east of Longview in an engineered system.
Any further public comment?
Denny French, thank you, Chair. Carson City. Clear Creek area, Ash Canyon Creek, is someplace that I had been concerned about on different occasions due to construction near to it and their lack of sensitivity towards a runoff of the property that they were working on for the development there off of Longview. And I didn't get very much cooperation just by calling them and saying, listen, I'm seeing this and we have erosion going into the creek, until the city stepped in. And that took a bit because I had misstated it and there was a confusion about the issue that I was trying to direct my attention to and the consideration of the city. I have no problems with somebody doing their due diligence as this gentleman has definitely been doing. I think enough is enough too. I think that the individuals around them had a right to think, hey, we allowed this subdivision, the community did. It's not just the neighbors. The community said, hey, we've got services for it, we've got the water for it, we've got the things that we need to have to make it possible. And now it's expanding, and now there are issues that community has that are living next to it, and I think rightfully so. Those areas are very vulnerable. How do you make a rule that's not so wishy-washy or just not set firm enough or not understood well enough to really take it hold? And in this case, I understand that there is an issue of trying to make things available and such, but we're not able to say, hey, no. I would have said no to the guest house, to the mother-in-law place because of other concerns that other places would build not to keep the mother-in-law, but perhaps to make it a rental. The additional parking, the additional water, and the different things. But the property that they have, and they have their HOA, and they have their CCNRSs, I appreciate that. But it's not making me feel real comfortable about what we're doing in the meanwhile while we're trying to develop our master plan. Thank you very much.
Seeing no one else, staff?
Thank you again, Heather Manzo, for the record. I will try to address everything that was mentioned. So we discussed a concern about the number of units. So this is a 12-unit subdivision in SF1A. So when this was approved originally, the tentative map, they did a smaller lot size and dedicated a common open space area to preserve Ash Creek and to provide additional landscape area along Longview. So this is the subdivision map, and we can see the open space surrounding these 12 lots. So that was all part of the original proposal, and that is allowed by code to reduce lots by providing 30% or more open space. So in terms of project drainage concerns, Mr. Metcalf mentioned what code requires, and that requires drainage to go from private property into the drainage facilities in the roadway. So properties are not allowed to drain onto other private properties. And Stephen can speak to that more if you guys have additional questions on engineered slopes and drainage. And then in terms of taxes, you're spot on. Sometimes we find out about guest buildings that have been constructed after the fact because the assessor's office finds them and tax them on that. So yes, properties do get taxed based on what's been built. And when guest buildings are added to properties, that is part of how the tax bill is calculated. So there was a question that Kelly raised regarding the difference in square footage. So as Hope had mentioned, there's two different triggers in our code. One is for guest buildings, which you're right, the language is confusing and we're working on a code update to address this issue. A guest building is an accessory structure, is a mother-in-law quarters. They're all exactly the same thing. What you call them is really just dependent on which jurisdiction you're in and what their code is adopted to say. So back in March when we had a Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission meeting, we really had a conversation about what it should be called. And that's going to be something that gets addressed with the code update that we're working on right now. In terms of the size, so a guest building, if it exceeds 1,000 square feet of living space in SF1A, it triggers a special use permit. So that's the living space area. The living space has not changed on this. It still remains the 1,176 square feet that it originally was. So that's one set of code. The other one is accessory structures. And under the umbrella of accessory structures are detached garages, pergolas, shops, and guest buildings also fall under that accessory structure kind of framework. And there are some size limitations in the accessory structure standards that have to do with, number one, the cumulative square footage based on the lot size, which is where this 5% rule comes into play. This was reviewed and approved based on the square footages we knew of at that time. We became aware that the square footage was actually larger because of that covered entryway. So the accessory structure standards are being met by this special use permit request to exceed the 5% of the lot area on the overall structure. So this structure happens to have an attached garage and an entryway that is attached to the living area, if that all makes sense. So there's two different code sections. The living space has not grown since it was approved last year. And then we already addressed mother-in-law versus guest house versus accessory dwelling units. So as we clarified for Sina a little earlier, guest buildings and accessory structures are allowed by code in this zoning district. They're an allowed use. The only reason it's before the Planning Commission this evening is because, number one, the guest house portion of it is 1,176 square feet. That was already previously approved. Today, we're looking at that square footage of the accessory structure that exceeds 5% of the lot size. So that's what's being considered this evening, is just the accessory structure standards and whether or not it can exceed 5% to increase to 5.44. I think that addresses all the questions.
I'd like to bring it back to the commission. Any questions? Commissioner Cron? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner DeChristopher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to admit I struggle with this one. I completely appreciate what you've had to say, Mr. Metcalf. One of the concerns I had tonight that jumped out at me, because I was like, okay, I'm getting everything here. I'm understanding, it's rational to me. Surprised me that we have addresses being assigned by the city. And I know that's something you have no control over. I'm speaking as a planning commissioner on 2 points. One, the sheer irony that if everyone in that subdivision, that development, chose to put on a guest house, we would end up with the same number of addresses that the public originally pushed back on. And I know that might be a very oversimplifying things. But that point jumps out at me, and the other point is, yes, it is an exception. I understand what my fellow Commissioner Sina Lloyd was clarifying about a special use permit. But when we say yes to this, and should these other property owners request the same, we open the door. We open the door for that. So I know you're going to respond to me, so please do. Thank you.
It's Commissioner Borders, please.
Now, a couple things. On Heather, thank you, but I came to the same conclusion that you did the other way around. I was having trouble with item number 8. And it was originally written, it says 1,176 square feet in size, and that the accessory structure will not exceed 1465.5. All right, if you take out the old garage and you add in the new garage and you add the 100 square feet, you get to 1584. So that was never very clear until you get your Mark I pencil out and try and figure it out and look at the plans and do that. So I think that I know it caused some confusion in the audience. I know it caused confusion around here, but I think the bottom line is, number one, the size of the building itself, the footprint of the house itself has not changed. And it's 176 square feet larger than I'd like for it to be. But that's the way it was. So, and the other thing that I guess I ask Hope about is that we're still struggling with this is not that it is not rentable. And at one point there was going to be a deed restriction requirement, I think, in the code. Is that still there, or is that still a requirement, or how do we assure the public, other than we tell them you can't rent houses in a residential district? How do we codify that?
It actually is codified.
Okay.
So it's in our development standards, which is part of our code, as we discussed the other night. And there is a requirement that they cannot charge rent, that it's for family members or guests, and they have to record a deed restriction that reflects that prior to CO. And so because it's codified, it's not necessarily called out in the conditions of approval, because it's a given, you have to comply with code. And if we start writing the code requirements down as conditions, you don't understand, well, that's just a code requirement. You might think you can change the wording or change it, and you can't. So yeah, that is a requirement.
All right, thank you.
Any further discussion?
So I believe Commissioner DeChristopher was looking for some clarification on addressing and when do we say yes and when do we say no? So with addressing, it actually is a requirement by the fire department, and that's so when they get a call for service, they go to the right spot. So even in like a storage facility, when there's separate buildings for like personal storage, each one of those buildings has to have a separate address so that we respond to the right location. So it's purely for emergency response so that we make sure that we're responding to the right place and having a timely response to that. And then you're right. The question is, when do we say yes and when do we say no? And it really is codified with our special use permit findings. So when the Planning Commission is unable to make a special use permit finding based on the request, then that's when we say no. So when we look at this, we look at, the compatibility with the area. We look at whether or not it meets all of the code requirements aside from the changes that are being requested with the special use permit. And the other of the 7 findings. And if we can say yes to each of those findings, then we say yes to the special use permit. And if we can't make even one of those findings, then that's where a vote to say no would come in.
Commissioner Lloyd?
I was just ready to try a motion, if we're ready for that.
Please go forward.
I wrote it down, so let's see if I can read it. I move to approve special use permit LU 2023-0379 based on the ability to make all findings and subject to the amended conditions of approval contained in the staff report with number 7 to read as originally written, and to add number 10, that both the main structure and accessory structure facade, I'm not sure if that's the right word, should coordinate.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cron. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, and may I please have your reasoning?
I voted against this 2 years ago because I thought it was not consistent with finding number 2, and I'll stay with that.
Hear, hear, and the concerns of the public as well.
Commissioner Perry and Commissioner Kilgore?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Next is,
Madam
I-
Chairman,
yes,
before we press on, could I ask one other question that is germane to that? When we're talking about addresses, if I build how does BFI, or how does Waste Management know to send me a trash bill? By their address?
I'm sorry, Waste Management?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Waste Management.
Okay. They're probably, it's interesting. We have a lot of properties that have multiple addresses, and it gets tricky, and there's usually a primary address. Waste Management's probably sending it to the owner of record per the assessor,
Okay.
as opposed to a physical. So if you have a renter in
But-
there, they may not be
My,
responsible.
my concern is, and it has nothing to do with what we just
Mhm,
did,
mhm.
but if you have an accessory dwelling and they have their own sewer line and their own water line and their own water bill, and they may or may not have their own electric bill, and they may or may not have their own trash bill, that seems like another house to me, not an accessory dwelling. And I know we haven't addressed that. And
Actually, and this will be off topic, but I'll be short on this. We actually do. And we do it when you have those buildings accessory buildings that exceed 75% of the size of the primary residence. And I think Commissioner Perry and I have had that conversation about why you see this. And I said, because we want to look at land use. Is this still a residential use, or have we transitioned to a different use? And so when we look at the size of these accessory dwellings, and you see these, and they tend to be shops and they tend to be no-brainers, but it's sort of a sliding scale, right? When, I like to use the example, when do you have a house and you happen to have a horse in the backyard with a barn? Or when do you have a horse property and you have a caretaker's unit? Technically, they're kind of the same thing, but there's this tipping point where you go from one to the other.
Welcome. Okay, item 6B, LU 2023-355 for possible action and discussion and possible action regarding a request from the city of from Carson City applicant for a special use permit, SUP, to allow for site improvements associated with the Quill Water Treatment Plant rehabilitation project on property zoned public community, PC, located in 2944 Kings Canyon Road, assessor parcel numbers APNs 007-061-82 and 007-131-17. Heather.
Thank you, Heather Manzo, again for the record. So this request is really to do improvements on an existing water treatment facility site. So what I've done here is kind of provided the aerial photo of what it looks like today. I know it's a little blurry, but it's the best I could do for the size. So this is existing. It is already fenced. There's about 15 acres within this facility that is operated as one of our water treatment facilities. So what this request is for is every use within a public zone requires a special use permit before, or sorry, every improvement requires a special use permit before they can get a building permit to construct those improvements. So because there are improvements being added to the site, it triggers that special use permit review. The footprint of the site remains exactly the same as it is today. So what I've done is provided the existing site plan to show kind of where the improvements are located on the site. And then I also provided a site plan based on the proposal that's before you this evening. So the areas that are changing are highlighted are circled with yellow. And those are areas where they're adding the drying beds, the building expansion, a concrete pad for a future equalization tank. Because the tank isn't being proposed today, when Public Works has the funds to build that, then that will come before the commission again. And then there's the backwash ponds on that southeast corner where the green is. And what that green is their landscape plan. So based on the application, there are 5 existing trees that are being removed to accommodate these improvements. And with this project, there is a proposal to include new trees and landscaping along that area that was highlighted in green. So trees are being removed and being replaced at a rate of, I believe, 4 to 1. Most of the trees are evergreen to provide that year-round screening. And then there are additionally 5 or 6 deciduous trees, the autumn blaze maple, that will have, further screening during the warmer months and then turn fall colors and drop their leaves in the fall. So that's what's before you this evening with this request. It's been made by Carson City Public Works to improve our ability to serve the public with water. The applicant is available to answer questions, and if he's not, then Stephen's also here to answer for Public Works. Staff's recommending approval of this request. We did get late material that was provided to you, and I did receive a couple of phone calls. A lot of folks were concerned that this was something that was going to be new and generate a lot of new activity. What was interesting is because it's tucked so far back, I drove past the road to get there and had to turn around up Kings Canyon. It's one of those things that unless you're in one of those homes that's overlooking it from above, you really don't know it's there. And so the Public Works staff can help address questions about how this might impact trips per day and additional noise and things like that. But generally speaking, this is a very low impact improvement. Once construction's done, the water facility is going to continue to operate much the same way it is today.
Good evening, Randy Rice, City Engineer for the record. I think Heather covered the most part of it, but just a couple of key points or takeaways for this project. Right now, the site is antiquated. It's diatomaceous earth filters that really aren't doing a great job of filtering the water up there. Carson uses a conjunctive use. That means we take groundwater and surface water to provide water to the citizens of Carson City. This particular site is only operating at about a third of what it could produce right now. I believe it's capable of doing about 6 million gallons a day. Right now, we're only capable of doing about 1.5 million gallons per day. Part of that is because of the new regulations and our inability to treat the water to modern standards. And then part of that is just because the filters are unable to treat the range of water quality that we see coming into the system. The plan here is to expand the building by about 30%, give or take. Currently, it's about a 10,000 square foot building. We're going to expand further to the north by about 3,000 square feet or 3,200 square feet, essentially adding a portion to the building to allow the new filters, which are somewhat larger than the existing filters and have more modern treatment processes involved. So they're called package filtration systems. With the addition of these 3 new filter trains, we're going to be able to treat up to 6 million gallons per day. We will have a couple of new ponds, some pipe modifications, but really, as far as traffic coming in, it's not a lot of aggregates or materials that will be coming into the site. So it will be the occasional lowboy or dropping off of excavators and things like that, pipe materials that will be coming onto site. Most of the work will be in the building itself. There will be some noise generated. All that noise will be generated during the daytime hours or during normal working operation, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. kind of thing. We don't anticipate any night or evening works at this stage. I think that covers most of the major topics. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Your Borders?
Heather, is Water Tank Road on the city easement? Does the city own that road from the gate?
So
It's locked?
yeah, the orange boundary is a 414 acre parcel that the city does own.
Okay. Is there anything that's going to be done with that entrance onto Ash Canyon? That's really, I drove down there and that's a little scary sometimes. And it just seems like if we're going to start spending that kind of money out at Quill, we ought to do something with how it meets the Ash Canyon Road.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. So the plan right now is to not do anything, and I'll tell you the reason that is. When we first started this project, we began the preliminary engineering review, the PER. I believe it was sometime back in 2017. Is that right? And so in 2017, prices were significantly less. And so when we did the planning and our capital investment and we redid our water planning model for fees coming into the water system, the amount to build that road was substantially less. Now that we fast forward to today, 2023, we can no longer afford to do the road with this project. Additionally, doing these projects or expanding the scope of the work that we're doing with this project is involved with federal money. And so every time we do that, it increases the price because we have to add material testing and other federal requirements that exacerbate the cost that these improvements will require. With that being said, there is a plan. We do have a small budget that we have set aside for the future construction of this road. We would like to do that in the future once this construction is done. All the heavy equipment has gone through and done the project. And so that we're not getting a lot of heavy stress on the newly paved road prior to this project being done.
Well, it's not even the whole, I can see leaving the road for a while, but just the interchange. That coming off of Ash Canyon, if you come off the other way, I'm sorry, Kings Canyon. If you come off the other way, it's really kind of dangerous, I think.
You're talking about the steep nature of the approach and all that?
It's steep and it's oriented in one direction and you can't see the cars and the whole thing. I can understand us waiting for the road, but if there's some way to do something about where it meets Kings Canyon, I think it would go a long way.
Yeah, understood. I think something to consider here as well is I believe there's only 2 properties that access that, one being a private residence and one being Carson City. We've operated this road in its current condition for, I believe, 40 or 50 years. And so our operators are very aware of how to navigate that. But point noted, certainly when we go to do the road, one of the ideas we want to look at is to increase the height of the road, which will decrease the pitch or the slope coming into that entrance. And then we would utilize the uphill side of that road as a detention basin is also to help with some of the storm events that occur in that area. So that is a big plan that we do have for that area. It just won't be associated at this time with this project.
Thank you, Chair. In 2016, I did the Chamber's Leadership Program, and we toured that facility. And I think even at that time, there was discussion about a planned rehabilitation at some point down the road. How long has this kind of been the plan and hope that like we would get those federal dollars to be able to do it?
Yeah, so I've also brought Mike Friend, our project manager for the project. It sounds like these thoughts have been well in the works for over a decade. It does take time to bring these to fruition. The other thing that is a challenge for us is the state does update their regulatory requirements fairly regularly, especially in regards to the water quality aspects of water treatment. And so it's an ever-evolving process. And so even when we start these projects, they tend to change or add new requirements right in the middle of them sometimes. And we just have to be prepared to adapt and move on. So
Thank you.
Commissioner Cron?
Yeah, I had a question for, excuse me, for Heather. On page 5, under finding 2, page 5, finding 2, it talks about the application notes that no new lighting is being proposed. But then down there it talks as a condition, it talks about to provide a lighting plan at the time of the building permit. Could you explain how that works?
Sure, thank you. So there is no proposed new lighting associated with this request. In speaking with the applicant, there may be plans to, as energy efficiency, options are available for lighting, there may be a plan to update the existing lighting fixtures. Oftentimes that will trigger new electrical that requires a permit. So because thinking in advance of those, goals of energy efficiency, I did add into this a condition to require that if lighting is updated, that they provide a lighting plan that shows that they'd be meeting code. So that's where that came from. Any other questions?
Along those same lines, it does indicate in here in the staff report that it's the lighting in and of itself is, how shall I say, is not really prevalent on the site. It's it's minimal lighting up there. My question is of course there's that balance between wanting to secure a site and have security cameras up there to pick things up at night, but also the impact on the residents. And I will admit that I have not had a chance to see that facility at night. So my question becomes is how obtrusive, there we go, that's the word I'm looking for, how obtrusive is the existing lighting on the site as it is?
So I do know that in our late material, we did have a couple of emails that specifically spoke to lighting. One of them is a neighbor that lives nearby, and they may be here this evening, but they had noted that the nighttime lighting is kind of a lot. So I think I could turn it over to Public Works in terms of what options may be available for addressing that issue, especially at night when there aren't really folks there.
Yeah, so I will be honest, I haven't been to the site at night either, so I take the word of the folks that live out there. Certainly, the reason we didn't include it at this stage, I believe the threshold for dark skies is 50% building extension, so we don't have any new lighting proposed, and we didn't plan on touching or modifying any of the existing lighting that's out there. But with that being said, I can certainly take these comments back to our group and see if there's some shielding or something we can do to maybe reduce some of that light eminence that's coming out of them.
Because I do think there's this opportunity for the city to be a good neighbor. If there is something that really is obtrusive out there, maybe we can take a look at that as the city and make some changes. Whether it's a part of this project, I think, and again, you're right, there's a, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a trigger that would in fact require changing of the light fixtures, but maybe it's being a good neighbor. So you don't always need a trigger to be a good neighbor. So again, I'm speaking from not having been out there on the site, but if we've gotten some comments from the neighbors, it might be something that the city could look at and just be fair in your assessment related to being a good neighbor. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll bring that back to our folks, and if there's something we can do that makes sense, we'll absolutely do it.
Commissioner Perry?
Oops.
Thank you. Randy, good to see you again. Is this the engineer of record here? Is this Mike?
Yes, Michael Friend, project manager.
Thank you. We got to get you talking here,
All right.
you know, so that you get going and you learn how to be in front of the public and get grilled by all of us up here. So I'm going to ask you these questions, and we're not going to let Randy talk, okay? And there's really two of them. One is in this plant here, there's two sources of water I heard. There's the surface water, and is that from Kings Canyon Creek?
Yes, it's actually three sources. We have Kings Canyon Creek, Ash Canyon, and then we have the Marlet Hobart system.
Oh,
we
that
take
comes
from.
in there too, huh?
Yeah.
Everything feeds into that plant, okay? So what
Yes.
percentage of the city's water supply does this plant represent as far as fresh water?
Freshwater, it's our only surface water treatment plant, so it's all fresh water. All remaining is groundwater from our wells. So this is our only surface water treatment plant.
Okay, so it's the surface water plant. The wells go directly into the system because they don't have to be filtered, right?
That's correct.
Okay. What's the new filter type? I'm just curious, being a process guy.
They're packaged filtration with like a 3-sand media system. So it has sand, anthracite, and then it'll have like a garnet on top. And we're still kind of going through we have two manufacturers that supply it. So they're a little bit different on their media. Some of the media is buoyant, the other media isn't. So it's an engineered sand filter system.
So it would flow through one of the filters until the differential pressure, and then it flushes itself, and another one goes online, and that's why you're building these ponds, because they have to have a place to discharge the sediment to, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and that sediment gets picked up by a city truck and it's hauled to the dump, right?
Yes, it takes a while for it to build up, and then we do that currently right now with the DE, but it's mostly DE and sediment. So they actually we end up hauling a lot of that DE back to the landfill.
How often does a truck go down there and scrape that stuff up and take it to the dump?
I don't know off the top of my head. I may be guessing maybe a month, every other month. One of the good things about having this new system is that it's not a DE system. When I know most people haven't taken a look at the plant, but we store a lot of DE up there because we go through a lot of DE.
Mm-hmm.
We won't be going through that much DE. These filters, actually, the sand and stuff should be good for 10, 20 years before we have to filter them out. So the only thing that we really are producing is that sediment. So technically, we should be producing less sedimentation that will have to go to the landfill.
Thank you. And for Denny's clarification, since he doesn't like acronyms, and the public, DE is diatomaceous earth. It's that white stuff they mine out there in the canyon on I-80, and it's used as a filter media. So
Yes, that's correct.
we have a new term. Good. I was looking to see what, really kind of probing there to see what the impact on traffic would be, and just to kind of get a feeling for, how much of the city's potable water supply comes from this plant. And I'm thinking that probably in the wintertime, when you don't have to run wells, it's almost all of it. Is that correct?
Not quite. We still run quite a bit of our wells. I mean, the overall, and plus the water coming off of ash and stuff changes. So we balance it out on our need. So this overall will increase probably 5 to 10% of the total city system-wide capacity.
So I heard 1.5 million gallons a day to 6 million. Was that correct? And that's just because new filters and so forth. So it's going to make a big jump, right?
Yeah, and the whole idea behind that is that we're not going to be pumping our wells, especially during the summertime, is hard. And then we can allow those wells to recharge, and we can build up the aquifer, to kind of combat anything when we get droughts.
And surface water is cheaper than groundwater, correct?
Yes, that is
As
correct.
far as from an energy standpoint, okay, good. So I'm going to go back to Chuck's question on the road here, and feel free, either one of you. So I too thought, okay, so when I went up that hill and I turned left against a double yellow line. Is that illegal?
No, it's not illegal. And it could be just a striping misnomer in that particular area may be striped incorrectly, but no, it's not illegal to turn onto the roadway from a driveway.
Okay. And I noticed that across the street, just up there, there's a cross. So somebody died there in an accident. And I just was going to ask, I think it would be prudent to have one of your traffic guys take a look at that and say, hey, do we have the correct amount of striping here? And, should there be some signage there that says vehicles entering, that kind of thing, so that we don't get somebody hurt there? Because I understand the financial part of that. It is kind of a tough one to get onto that, but it was a little scary if somebody was coming down the hill.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
And I'd like to go ahead and put something in here too, is because I'm right with you on that. I've had several people that I've known over the years that have died on that particular road. And now we have increased traffic because everybody knows about the waterfall. So my concern too would be figuring out some kind of traffic mitigation, because you are going to have additional traffic for the construction, and we have additional traffic on that road. The other thing is this is a site where you blend, isn't it? Where you blend for the arsenic?
No,
So-
we don't blend with at this site. It's all surface water.
Okay, so this is not the blending site, okay. The other question I had for you is, this site, although it's a small footprint on this large acreage is not open to the public, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. One of the reasons I wanted to say that is because we had an applicant several months ago that indicated that they could walk right into the Quill Water site, and I want to make it very clear that people do not have the authority to walk clear into the Quill Water site. All right, and that would be Commissioner Christopher, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say it's a pleasure to see this project coming along. What gave me a lot of appreciation for it was reading an article from 2016. It did get into a lot of the detail that Commissioner Perry and Mr. Friend were bringing up. But having said that, the two concerns that I do want to underscore, Commissioner Crom's concern about lighting, let's try to be a good neighbor, and the previous comments about the exit coming in and out of that area. So with that being said, very supportive of the project. Thank you.
So just to address a couple of things I've heard, absolutely, when construction is underway, you'll see cones, flaggers, signage will increase tremendously, right, to indicate the presence of those construction vehicles and equipment that will be entering occasionally on and off the site. I thought I had one more thing, but I was going to add, but I forgot. Oh, and yeah, just a reminder, this is a private road, right? So you're not going to have public entering or exiting this. The other thing I did want to mention was, after the completion of this project, a lot of the valves that are currently turned manually, and a lot of the things we have to do by manual operation, by having operators actually go to the site and complete these tasks, will be automated. So a lot of the valves will be run through SCADA and through telemetry. So you'll be able to access, or our staff will be able to access through iPads remotely and be able to view the site and what's happening with this equipment remotely. So it will actually, we're hoping to decrease the number of trips that staff will have to go out there to address some of those maintenance and operations tasks.
You better tell everybody what SCADA is
Okay.
now, because it's an acronym.
Okay, SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. So it helps us talk remotely with equipment and computers using hardware.
Okay, now you brought up SCADA. Okay. Now with SCADA, usually you have to have a battery, generator backup. So do we have generator backups on this site currently, or are we going to have more generators running and more noise?
It currently has a generator on site, and it is actually sized for the new plant, so there'll be no additional generators or anything like that. Yeah, it's just a backup generator.
Pretty much anything in the city that has to do with, water or sewer pumpage or anything like that has double or triple redundancy, right? Because the inclination for these things to fail and have tremendous outcomes are very poor. So we want to make sure that everything is backed up. Anything from dispatch radios all the way down to sewer lift stations and water pumping system. Those will typically come on, once a month or once every couple months, just to make sure that the systems are running appropriately. So if the switch does kick on, it notices a power interruption, that system is ready to go. We check fuel on those regularly. So those are all normal operations throughout the city.
And then be Commissioner Cron.
Yeah, one last question. One of the dangers when you go through development standards, you all of a sudden realize that there are certain things you remember. And one of those things, so it's kind of dangerous to be reading through those development standards. And one of those has to do within the development standards related to Division 3. And in Division 3, which is the landscaping standards, they talk about the removal of trees on a project site. And is I believe the standards, it's Division 3.4, they talk about when you remove an existing tree on site, it's a 2-to-1 replacement caliper, basically, is what you're doing. So I guess my question is that as a part of the landscaping plan, was that considered in the quantity of trees that have been designed into that? And also, we have been talking about pollinator species. We were trying to figure, is that somewhere maybe in the mix? Although at this point, being a pollinator species is not, we're considering it in the development standards. It's not a code requirement per se. But the replacement issues, when you take out existing good trees, there is a replacement. And I just wanted to make sure that that was covered, related to the landscaping and the quantity of trees and the sizes of the trees in that case.
Yes, I think we removed, it was a 4-to-1 ratio. So for every tree removed, we planted 4. And then we have shrubbery in between, because we understand that these trees, as they mature, in the very beginning, it's still going to be thin, and you're still going to be able to see the building. So we actually had Parks and Rec help us design it and put in that shrubbery in between. So it'll kind of grow up all together and create a nice kind of a nice wall that kind of protects or keeps the visual.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lloyd?
So you mentioned smart devices, smart meaning Wi-Fi connected. This might be suggesting too much. I'm not going to ask for it, but I'll suggest it. Lights can also be controlled via iPads, so it might be worth it to control some of the lighting in that manner.
Appreciate the suggestion. One thing I will just mention for this commission's consideration, when our plants are having trouble, they are emergencies. That's not something we pull out our iPad and wonder how to turn on the light switch, right? And so vehicles approaching, typically in an emergent situation, they're approaching rapidly. Their brain is thinking about what valves to turn, what things need to be fixed, what filters need to be turned on, turned off, flush, whatever. So while I do appreciate that thought, sometimes for our projects, redundancy and simplicity overrule the need for kind of flashy items. And so, again, we'll take this back with our operations team. We'll look at if there's something we can do, like I said, shielding or timers or even, motion switches, or if there's something that makes sense for us, certainly we want to be good neighbors. But definitely expenses and simplicity, all that's
Maybe it's not
expected.
all of them.
For sure, yep.
To open it up for public comment. Okay, come forward. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Alan Kithcart. I live in King Canyon Meadows, which is this proposed facility is adjacent to our development. And having never attended a meeting like this before, I wasn't sure kind of what the protocol were, procedures. I wanted to make a statement and then ask some questions, and not sure if that is proper or not. My questions were going to be directed to the commission, but now that the gentleman from the Public Works, are they still here? Yeah. My questions will actually be going to them. So my concern is I moved here 2.5 years ago, and I chose this area of Carson City because it's very pristine. I think we would all agree that Upper Kings Canyon is a beautiful area. And to be honest, had I known if this were being proposed 2.5 years ago, I'm not sure that that a water treatment plant was going to be going in next to where I was looking to live, that I would be as thrilled as I was to move to that locale as what I was. My first question is, so this facility is going to be handling, you said, just surface water, correct?
Sir, please address the commission and the staff will take notes.
Oh,
Just keep
okay.
going.
So that's my first question is, what is the source of the water that's going to be treated at this facility? Why does it need to be treated? What is it going to be treated with? Are there any odors that will be associated with this additional treatment? I'm concerned about the noise factor, the construction, how long is it going to last? And one thing that I wasn't even concerned about, but I am now, is that road that comes off of Kings Canyon is right next to our homes. And when we see the trucks coming off, if anyone lost control of a vehicle, it's coming right down onto our paths. I would hate to think of a construction type vehicle, coming down, anyway. So the concern, the road situation is something I feel does need to be addressed. I'm a little surprised that the gentleman has not been out to the facility yet before coming to this meeting. I think it would have helped if he had seen, the situation out there in the actual facility and the road to be able to address comments on that. So again, just clarification as to why is the facility being built there as opposed to someplace else? And really, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm always worried when somebody says they're taking out a tree. I was glad that you had them clarify some of the deals around that. Environmental impact studies are just not a big thing for the city, and I think that's a shame. But I understand that quill is really important, even more so now that we have mucked up a lot of the places where we had natural settling areas for the water or waterway floodplain areas all being developed, and those were natural filterings. So now we're buying product to filter what was done naturally in a lot of places that quenched our aquifer type considerations. But we've been told that those floodplain areas will be mitigated and that we won't get floods, but we are also not getting the natural filtering that we used to from those areas. So I really appreciate that Quill has to be redone and has to take on a bigger part of the water filtering program. Arsenic and the other things that we're sort of blessed with because of our land and the soil and such. Actually, we can mitigate it by buying water from other areas. But quill is important, and I hope they do a gentle job of this. And I think the people involved are conscientious, and they'll do their best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Danny Mullivis.
Bring it down, Danny.
Sorry.
Pull the microphone closer to you, please. Good, thank you.
My name is Danny Mullivis, and I'm the HOA president for Kings Canyon Meadows. So I'm coming, bringing lots of questions from the homeowners in that area. I did hear that the road, and I thought I heard Water Tank Road, would be elevated. we live down from there. It's Water Tank Road is above us. So if they elevate it any higher, I'm wondering if we'll be able to see the trucks and to hear them more clearly. We won't have that embankment there to quiet some of the noise. And also, we're very concerned about lighting and even noise during the day. How much more noise will there be? Those are the main questions. And how much more traffic is anticipated? Right now, there are trucks going through there every now and again, mostly pickup style trucks. So we're kind of wondering, like, after the building, how much traffic is expected? Oh, no, that's okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'd like to consider something, is that if there's a lot of questions of the public, and because it does affect you. And I was wondering if it would be possible if Public Works could meet with all of you out in the vestibule area, and you can get your questions answered, and we can table this until you could have your questions answered, and then we can come back to it and we can go on with our agenda. Would that be something that would work for you? Terrific. Then let's go ahead and do that, please. Thank you. And you're asking those questions too? Okay. Are you on this subject?
Yes, I'm on this subject. My name is Deborah Braun, and I live at 305 Sussex Place, which is right below Water Tank Road. I just want to make a statement that
Certainly.
when they redo Water Tank Road after all the construction, to take into consideration runoff of water, because we have had problems in the past of water problems in Kings Canyon Meadows, our HOA, and we actually had to get a small business administration loan of, I believe it was $300,000 to fix our pathways there due to flooding. So I want to go on the record regarding that. And also about Ash Canyon Road with all the construction going on, and also the new homes that are going on all around us there. Ash Canyon is a mess. And I know I heard that there is not money to fix Ash Canyon, but with the additional traffic, it really is going to even further worsen the ability to drive on Ash Canyon. It's hard now. You can barely pass each other on Ash Canyon. It's even worse in the wintertime with snow on either side. And so I would also like to go on the record to please try and get money to fix that road as soon as possible. Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Then if the public would like to step outside with Public Works, we can do that. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
The question directed at my direction was, do we need to take any action to table it? No, the commission itself does not. The commission itself does not need to take any action, but the chair can simply table this item until later in the meeting.
Okay, that is what the chair would like to do, is table it until later in the meeting, please. Thank you. Okay, Now we're going to go on to item 6C. LU 2023-3054 for possible action and discussion. Possible action regarding the request from Lamar Advertising Company, the applicant for a special use permit, SUP, to retain an existing billboard on the property zone general commercial located at 4440 Highway 50 East, assessor parcel number APN 008-28111. And is this where I say that the Commissioner Lloyd would like to recuse herself?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I have a disclosure to make.
Okay, please.
Commissioner Lloyd, for the record, NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. Mr. Christopher Wickstead has previously provided public comment regarding the billboard at issue in this agenda item, and the Planning Commission had previously asked the applicant to work with Mr. Wickstead to minimize the lighting effect at his property. I have a personal relationship with Mr. Wickstead that qualifies as a commitment in a private capacity under NRS 241A.065. Due to the relationship, the judgment of a reasonable person in my position would be materially affected, and I will not be voting on this matter.
Thank you. Okay. Hope.
You may recall this billboard. The Planning Commission looked at it, and this is like a do-over from October 26, 2022. You looked at the guest house at that meeting. You looked at this billboard at that meeting. During that meeting, you required a one-year review, and you indicated there could be no lighting and no glossy designs. We have looked at the billboard and we have observed it. It is in compliance. This is a picture that was taken today of the billboard, and there's no lighting on it. And they are using, as I understand it, non-glossy designs. Staff has reviewed the required findings of fact for the special use permit and have made those in the affirmative. We are recommending approval of this billboard for 5 years. And I'm happy to go more in depth on this or answer any questions.
Is the applicant here?
My name is Danny Sylvie. I'm representing Lamar Advertising.
Commissioner Cron, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No, but I had it for staff. That would be hope. We'd receive some public comment or a public comment. And billboards are not necessarily something that I enjoy seeing, but this particular person wanted to get rid of them altogether, throughout the city. And my question becomes is how, since billboards are approved along the main corridors, how does this work from a code perspective? Is that even an option, to get rid of billboards? And I'm not trying to pick on this one, specifically, but just in general, how can you explain to me and the public how billboards are this blight on the on the visual environment that we have, but they're kind of a necessity? So.
Okay. Right. So Carson City does allow billboards, and over the years, we've had this conversation. Typically, what a community does who does not want billboards is they will regulate it as such, but they'll usually it's typically a 7-year amortization period so that the owners of the billboard can realize the value of the billboard. And what you have to do from a procedural due process standpoint, it's a lot. You have to inventory all the billboards. You have to notify the owners of every single billboard that you're starting the amortization. And then you have to track the billboard so that if they needed to get building permit for something, then you wouldn't allow that. So there is a process, and typically it includes amortization. So it wouldn't be that the city would say, okay, we're not going to allow billboards effective January 1, and they would all come down. They would be pre-existing non-conforming uses at that point. And then if you really want them to go away, you would start the amortization process. So there's the way the city does it with the 5-year, the special use permit having to be renewed every 5 years. I suspect what's happened since this has been in effect is those billboards that were non-conforming in the sense that there's certain non-conformities that are allowed. So when you do your 5-year review, you're not allowed to say no to the special use permit based on some of the nonconformities. Like, for example, I think distance to the redevelopment areas or in a redevelopment area is one of them. But those other billboards that couldn't comply with the standards, those are probably no longer up. So because of the city's regulations.
Well, one of the things that as I read through the staff report, I wasn't here when you had this particular special use permit come through. So I was pleased as I read the staff report that the lights came off of it. The commission has been working its way for dark sky friendly and trying to move away from lighting these billboards up in the evening. So I was glad to see that. Also, I had the opportunity to go out and take a look at it as well, and I thought that the non-glossiness really made a difference, just from a visual standpoint. So I appreciate the applicant doing that.
Commissioner Kilgore?
Well, I'm not going to let you be alone on this one. So for almost 3 years now, it's been my speech and concern to get rid of all of these things. I don't pick on any individual one. I pick on every single one. I wish the amortization had started 7 or more years ago. That way these could be down entirely and completely. They're nothing but an eyesore. They, as far as I've seen, don't even generate a lot of revenue based on the advertisement that they provide. And I would like to, in some way, shape, or form, get to that level that it takes to start getting these timed out through that process. And just would love to be that person that really kick-started that, But like I said, it's been almost 3 years I've been preaching this. So it would be great to just finally see these all off of the skyline, in my opinion.
Commissioner Christopher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I went past this one. I have to say, we took the more attractive side of this billboard. I appreciate the lighting was taken down. I appreciate that a non-glossy finish. Unfortunately, you probably can't dictate colors. That would have to be something in our code. The opposing side of this billboard is a lavender to purple hue. It very much stands out. So for marketing purposes, very effective. What I have a problem with in this one is the location to the mobile home park there. And and this is hard to say, coming from a marketing communication standpoint, I would agree with Commissioner Kilgore that I am not a fan of billboards. So a yay to this, if I understood Ms. Sullivan correctly, would give us another 5 years. The other way to take care of billboards then is to make a decision just as this one is coming up tonight. Is that correct? I know it's a longer process than a 7-year.
I think Commissioner Cron's question was interesting, but I'm not sure it's specific to what's in front of you. I think that's a different conversation for a different day. And we have to look at the findings of fact on this one. And when we look at our spacing distance, we know that new billboards may not be located within 1,000 feet of each other. But it says the existing billboards that are being renewed are not required to meet that requirement. So there's certain things where we maybe say, well, gosh, we really wish they weren't in that location, but the code doesn't allow you to not permit the special use permit because of that. All of that said, we've referenced a couple times tonight the workshop we just had. You did not review the sign ordinance. The sign ordinance is going to be looked at by itself, so there will be an opportunity to do that review. But when we look specifically at this billboard, in the renewal of this billboard, which you looked at 1 year ago, they did take out the signs. They have been going with non-glossy. And I think the conversation, the broader conversation's an interesting one, but I'm not sure right now's that time.
Any further questions? Okay. All right. And do you accept the conditions? Okay. And I need to open it up for public comment. Okay. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, have to be going for a vote. And do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I move to approve LU-2023-0354 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays?
Absolutely an A.
Okay. And
One nay,
one nay,
one abstention.
one abstention.
Chair, just one thing. I agree, Hope, and maybe that wasn't the right time to ask the question, but I do think it's a larger question I think the commission needs to take a serious look at. We've got a lot of people up here that are not fans of billboards, for various reasons, and so I didn't necessarily want our fine applicant here to get swooped up into this bigger and larger conversation. I just do appreciate his willingness last year to go ahead and get the lights off, go with the non-glossy surfaces. Thank you. That does make a difference out there. So thank you for doing that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Borders.
Hope, I have another question as far as policy goes with this. This is now a 5-year renewal. We have several other billboards all through town that are on 5-year renewals. In our changing of the code, this is going to be eventually become an administrative renewal. Does it, when that happens, do they start over, or is it just when it comes due? In other words, this billboard's approved for 5 years. If next year we make an administrative review, does he have 5 years more, or does he just have 4?
It will depend on how you amend the code or how the board amends the code.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you.
Okay, that would be great. 6E. MPA 2023-0363 for possible action and discussion and possible action regarding a request from Carson City applicant for the adoption of a resolution approving a master plan amendment and recommending the Board of Supervisors Board to amend the master plan to eliminate the Brown Street specific plan area encompassing the 4± acre area generally located on Brown Street and North Edmonds between Gordon Street and Reeve Street. Assessor parcel numbers APN 008-30329, 008-30310, 008-30330, 3031, 008-30342, portion of 008-303.07, 008-30717, 008-30711, 008-30705, 008-30706, 008-3707, 008-3609, 008-36011, 008-30615, 008-30616, 008-60307, 008-30608, 008-30605, 008-30606, and 008-30801. Thank you. Certainly.
Okay, Hope Sullivan, Community Development Director. I'm actually, if you didn't figure it out, pinch hitting for Heather Ferris tonight. So the Brown Street specific plan. The city has 5 specific plans in the master plan. There's the Schultz Ranch specific plan, the Lampa specific plan, the V&T specific plan, I'm missing one, the Brown Street specific plan. There's a 5th one that I'm not thinking of right this second. The interesting thing about the specific plans, it means that you want to have a really focused look at things. In this case, when we consider the Brown Street specific plan, the city had an ownership interest in this area. And what the city was going to do was work with the redevelopment authority on some affordable housing. They also were going to put in a park, so there were going to be some improvements. There were some crime issues in this area at the time of the specific plan as well. And in talking to Commissioner Cron, he actually knew more about it than I did because he was familiar with the formation of this specific plan. 2 years ago, we went to the Board of Supervisors and said, we think as part of the master plan annual report, we should study the Brown Street specific plan. We didn't get to it 2 years ago. So this year we came back to the board and said, okay, we didn't get to it, but we still think we should study the Brown Street specific plan. And the board said, yeah, we remember when that went in and we were going to do some things, but we don't own the land anymore. We sold the land, and all those plans we had back when the specific plan was put in place, we're not sure those are relevant anymore. I'm not sure they're relevant anymore. What happens in the Brown Street specific plan that doesn't happen outside that red boundary? They have to do things like street trees. They can't put parking between the road and the building. They have to put on the side or the rear. They have to study their stormwater, and they have to do things that people outside that red line don't have to do, is the short answer. If you drive around there, it's pretty much built out. Granted, there's a lot of underutilized properties, but it's a very small area as well. And so staff's gone through the findings, and there's 4 findings to amend the master plan. And I think the conditions have changed from when this specific plan was put in place. And there's no reason to subject the properties that are within this red boundary to a different standard than the rest of the city. I think they can be subject to the same standard in the zoning in this area as for multifamily apartment. We have seen some investment in this area that's been really positive. During my tenure, I think Dwight Millard, who's here tonight, has built 2 apartment buildings in this area. You probably, if you went out, saw one under construction. Slot World, there's been a big investment there. Granted, it's not in the area, but it's adjacent to the area. Advocates has made investments. So this whole area is kind of changing, yet the ones inside that red boundary are subject to standards that are above and beyond everybody else. And I think our existing baseline standards would be adequate. I'm happy to answer questions or go more in depth on this.
Any questions, commissioners? Commissioner Perry?
So if I understand this, this is a cleanup of the master plan, right?
I think circumstances have changed, so yes, it will be a cleanup's appropriate.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cron?
Hope, how would you answer the question that if we're looking to hire a consultant team or in the process of hiring a consultant team, why not wait to take a look? We're only months away from getting a consultant on board and then the whole process. So why make this change now, or why propose this change now and not wait for the bigger process?
Because we're really clear on why this specific plan area was created. It was created because the city was a property owner and had very specific plans for its property and specific ideas on how this area should be developed. The city is no longer that property owner. And for 2 years now that we've had this on the books to study, the folks or property owners within this boundary have been subject to a higher standard than everyone else in the city. Now, we actually have executed the contract with Clarion to do the master plan update. I have a call with them, I think it's November 6th is our kickoff phone call. So we are moving forward, but that's 2025. I think this is kind of a no-brainer that doesn't need any more study than it's been given. We're essentially burdening some folks, and I'm not certain it's a value add.
Maybe as a follow-up to that question, is that in the Brown Street specific plan area, one of the things that identified was preventing isolated piecemeal development that occurs without an overall concept for the area that expresses a long-range vision. That was part of the goals of that specific plan area. So by doing this, and I certainly understand your point.
Yeah.
You know, I certainly do. So I'm not trying to be argumentative here. I'm just trying to kind of sort through this in my own head. And it's like, so by, if you will, taking off this the special planning area, criteria over this land, then people could come in and individually develop each of the properties on their own. So I guess that's really kind of the bigger question, is that before the city felt that it was important to have some continuity related to how that whole area was going to look and redevelop. And I guess that's really the question for me is, are the development standards and the codes strong enough to actually have that, even on an individual piece of property, develop into something nice in that area?
That's actually a really good question and a really good point you just brought up. So first of all, I'm going to tell you, despite being a specific plan area, granted there's some similarities for the properties that develop within this area. For example, they have to do the street trees. They can't put the parking in front of the building. They have to have the walkway that goes to the front door. The front door has to face the street. So there are some design elements in there that would create sort of some, the word I'm thinking of is congruent, and I don't like that word, but some similarities, if you will. That said, there hasn't been a whole lot of investment in here. I mean, Dwight Millard's built 2 apartment buildings in here, and otherwise, if you drove through, you can see there's not a lot of new construction. When he built the apartment that's around, I think it was this one. I think it was that one. It might have been this. But I was involved in that. We were applying the standards, but we weren't in a position to look at all the other properties. I say that because we have 2 other specific plans, the Schultz Ranch specific plan, which by the way is probably ready to sunset as well because it's essentially built out, and the Lampa specific plan. Lampa's more current. This commission will remember the Lampa specific plan because you had some large land holdings, but we identified how there would be connectivity and how the roadways would work and how the utilities would work. And so in that case, there really was an opportunity to look at it in a comprehensive way. Whereas this is so small and the ownership's so separated and what's occurring is so segmented that it's hard to look at that comprehensive approach to it like you can when you have a clean slate like Lampa or Schultz Ranch.
Thank you.
Commissioner Borders?
I hope, I just kind of wanted to reiterate, as I drove out there, I didn't see much left to do. There's some urban renewal that could happen out there, but I don't see anything that's left to renew. And I do agree with you with the fact that we do have a new contract with a new company to redo the master plan, but their schedule is 18 months to 2 years away.
19 months. Okay.
And then we're on a limited budget, and have them go and review this and spend the hours and the budget money to review this to tell us that we just ought to get rid of it seems like a kind of a waste. I think we could use their efforts in other places. So I don't have any problem with making a recommendation now to remove this and to move forward, so.
Any further questions or concerns? Okay, then let's go for a motion. Oh. Yes, public comment, please. Is there any public comment in changing this? Come in, Dwight. Don't jig. Yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. I just am here in support of banning this. When it first went into effect, it was to enhance the development of this area. I still think there's a lot of garbage dumps in there personally, and we're building new product. We're currently building our third project. The first project, we had to delete 2 apartments, which today, from the time that we built it, has cost me $500,000 when we consider the sale. Because we were zoned for and were allowed 57, have plenty of parking, but everybody wanted to cut it in prior staff to 55. So that cost money to me. Everybody in this red zone, when they hook up to sewer, pays more than the people outside. I don't know where our brains were when we did that. We were trying to entice people to build there, but the people inside the red zone have to contribute to the lift station that it dumps into. Everybody outside of that red zone doesn't pay that. And as a developer, and I'm on my third project, I'm going, it doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, what was the logic behind a specific plan area to pay more than the guy next to you? The second unit, we developed it and had a plan, submitted them. We weren't up to the street, so we had to move the building from the back to the front, had to be all re-engineered, and I refused to make people walk all the way around a building to go upstairs because the front door had to face the street. And so we redesigned the whole building and separated it so there was a walkthrough. Those are the kinds of things when we create spas, if we're not thinking about what we're doing, we just created a nightmare. And I know that the people in there don't want to really do anything in the nature of improvements because of the cost of doing the business. I don't know, I know I own no more property within a spa, but we own property adjacent to it on the left. And we bought this property from Carson City. We're paying for the lift station on the parcel that's in the red, and we're not paying for those outside of it. And we haven't built the ones outside. So I would encourage to do away with this at any time in the future, that we make specific areas. We look at the benefits and make it a beneficial unit instead of this is I would never build in this again as long as it remains a spa. I would spend more money staying out of it just because what might be appealing to me may not be appealing to somebody else. And in the case of eliminating 2 apartments, yeah, to that person that dictated that to me, that was an enhancement because it gave it a different roof line. The other 3 buildings, he didn't require that of, just the one. But it cost me in the long run, and I don't think that's appropriate.
I have a question for you now.
By the way, a spa is a specific plan area.
Okay. Okay, I have a question for you now. This, because I know that we, after our, when we do our growth management, we talk about different things like lift stations and so forth. Dwight, you brought up a lift station. Okay, the lift station, is this the one that is behind the mobile home park over kind of between Morgan Mill and Highway 50? Or is this a different lift station?
It's a different lift station. It's down by the river on Morgan Mill.
I'm talking about.
So, and just to add some clarification, the lift station actually is a requirement on multiple other projects. What Dwight was referring to is there's a storm drain pro rata share that has been applied to projects within the boundary, which does not apply to other projects.
I know that lift station has required some different improvements and so forth, and it's getting additional uses, and that some of these things would be part of this. So we are not eliminating off the properties that are inside this red barrier the requirement to pay for a lift station. What we are doing is we are requiring that they pay for a storm drain too, or is all this being removed? I'm confused.
The storm drainage requirements being removed. So when this was created, the city was aware of a regional drainage issue. And it was part of the SPA that anybody that develops in the SPA has to contribute towards alleviating that drainage issue. The problem with that is that it is a regional issue with a very large contributing watershed that flows into it. So it's really not equitable to say, okay, well, these few parcels here have to contribute when the rest of the watershed does not have to.
But the lift station remains as a requirement.
Correct. Yeah, that's anytime there's a special use permit or tentative map, that kind of thing.
Any other questions? Okay. Like to go for a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh, it's public comment. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Eric Flick, resident of Carson City. We just moved here from Dayton a little while ago. We actually are small investors. We own a couple buildings on North Edmonds Drive, and we maybe should have researched this before we bought one of the last remaining lots on North Edmonds, but we own that lot, and we did go through the first planning meeting, and it was very restrictive for a smaller investor on the costs that are not associated with people outside that plan area. So I would definitely recommend if you guys would remove this. It'd be helpful to maybe smaller investors that are trying to get into that area. And we were building multifamily unit housing there, but a lot of the costs that were associated with that plan are really restrictive. So we've kind of put the brakes on until something changes. So just want to recommend that you would approve the removal of that specific plan. Thanks.
Any other further comment? Public comment? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the commissioners.
Madam Chairman, I move to adopt resolution number 2023 PCR4.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming back, but I think we need to take a little recess. So I'd like to take about a 5-minute recess, return here at, let's make it 7:15, please.
Madam Chair, I just got to go get to ask that I don't return after that recess, or
Okay.
sorry about that.
All right, thank you. evening and calling to order the Wednesday, October 25th meeting and bringing back onto the calendar, oh gosh, what is it? 6B. And I'll just reinstate it as LU 2023-30, how about 0355 for possible action and discussion and possible action regarding a request from Carson City applicant for a special use permit at SUP to allow for the site improvements associated with the Quill water treatment and rehabilitation project on the property zone public community located at 2944 Kings Canyon Road. Assessor parcel numbers APN 007-06182 and 007-13117.
Thank you. So Heather Manzo again for the record. I'm just going to note that it was a really good idea to have the subject matter expert speak with the neighbors that were concerned. As you can see, many of them are no longer here because they got their questions answered. So I'll turn it over to you guys for any additional questions you may have.
Commissioners?
Did we ever officially end public comment?
No, I don't think we did. Is there any further public comment regarding the Quill water system? Seeing none, bring it back to the commissioners.
Madam Chairman, I move to approve special use permit LU 2023-0355 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
All in favor?
Can we have a discussion?
Oh, would you like a discussion?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
And I just, it's probably, because I'm going to vote for this too, but, I heard some questions out there and I think probably, some of them I was jotting down here and I appreciate you answering them, but this is a really, needed project for the city because it's going to create a lot more available, less expensive water. And the filter upgrades are also in the flow sheet there. They're going to replace chlorine with UV, which is a much healthier way to disinfect water. Surface water has to, I heard that question earlier, why can't you build it elsewhere? Well, because all the water flows in there, it's gravity. The answer to that is gravity. And filters don't make noise. And it's within the existing footprint, so it's really not an expansion, and I think that's what people were kind of concerned about. It's just a logical, well, it's not a new treatment plant. It's just an expansion of an existing plant. So, and I think we talked about the road issue, and it sounds like you're going to look into it because that seemed to be the biggest issue that everybody had there was a safety issue. So, okay. Now I will shut up.
The other thing that I think is important for the rest of the public to understand is this is a water treatment plant, not a sewer plant. We are treating potable water to make it more potable, not taking waste products and purifying them.
Thank you. And let's see. Now I have the motion read, had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion passes unanimously. I do want to note that Commissioner Kilgore did have to leave the meeting, but we still have a quorum.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now we go to 6D, LU 2023-3056 for possible action, discussion, and possible action regarding a request from Ben Ferrari. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Applicant for a special use permit, SUP, to allow for a permanent on-site placement of a metal storage container on property zone general commercial GC located at 1600 Airport Road. Assessor parcel number APN 008-31221. Heather.
Thank you, Heather Manzo for the record. So this is an existing developed apartment complex off of Airport Road to the south of Highway 50. What the applicant has requested is they had placed a metal storage container on the site when they started doing some remodel of existing units. And they were not aware that permanent placement required a special use permit review. So staff had notified them that they needed to follow process if they wanted to keep it there, and that's why this is before you this evening, is because the applicant would like to permanently place that metal storage building or container on the site for the storage of materials used for maintenance and remodeling of the units as needed. Staff had visited the site and noted right now it's a pretty blue. The applicant has noted that they will comply with code in terms of painting the container a color that is compatible and consistent with the existing apartment complex, and has proposed some landscaping along that the edge of the site. It's on the north side of the container, in between the drive aisle and where the container exists. That space is small enough to where landscaping is one option. The other option available to them based on code is to install a wall. So staff did not add a condition. It's a code requirement to provide that screening either with landscaping or with a wall. And the applicant, as they work with their engineers on this, can determine the best approach for screening from view from the drive aisle within the apartment complex and that container. So they have proposed that they're going to meet code requirements for the permanent placement of this, and the applicant is available to answer any questions that you may have, and I am as well at the appropriate time. Staff is recommending approval of this, and I have not received any public comments.
Okay. Commissioner.
Yeah, real quick. In the placement of the container, one of the things that I thought was nice was that you have that solid wall to the south and also arborvitae back in there between the container and that wall. So over time, even if you paint the container a neutral color or a color that matches some of the apartments in there, those arborvitae will get up high enough to also screen it as well. So I really liked that. And as far as I am concerned about the north side of the container, but you said that's a code requirement, so we don't need to add a condition or modify one of our findings to make that happen, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
This takes up, I think, what, 5 parking places? 6?
6. Yeah, they've, there's one clear that the doors
There's one
open
clear,
out
so the
to.
doors will open?
Correct.
What, does that affect their total parking requirement for the apartment complex?
It does not. They had a parking rate that was approved with our special use permit a few years ago, and they actually are exceeding what was required. So this is taking up what would be considered excess parking, and based on its placement, they placed the container there because those spaces aren't often used, and it's also set back from the right-of-way, so it's not as visible from the public right-of-way on airport.
I also note that last week, we spent a considerable amount of time talking about things like this. And that blue container is ugly. And if I lived in that apartment complex on the other side, I'd really think it was ugly. So whatever we can do now and with this to make that not ugly, I think is going to be a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, the one, I don't believe it is part of code, but going out there and taking a look at it, the only thing I would note in addition to the other commissioners' comments is there are 3 vehicles that have parking directly across from the storage container. So whether it's a wall or landscaping something up there, I would recommend some form of reflective signage, just as a reminder, because it's right on a corner. So you're going to have people who will be coming around that building, perhaps at the same time somebody's backing out. It's just a reminder that that is actually there, because I think I measured yes, I brought a wheel. I think it was like 12 feet between the back of a bumper and where that will be once a wall is up, or whatever they choose to put up there.
So the container and the landscaping or wall, whatever they do for screening on the north side, is going to be contained within the existing striped area. So it won't extend out into the drive aisle at all. That's not allowed. So
But for the cars that are, and I should be more clear, where this box is, there's the apartment building straight across from it. So there's 3 tenants who, when they back up, it'll be towards that container, in addition to it being on the corner of the building.
yeah, there's existing parking there now. So today a vehicle could be in that same area that's being used by the container. So it meets the parking lot geometry for both backing out of those spaces across the way and
Right.
for the drive aisles.
No, and I do understand that. I'm sorry, I'm probably not making my comment clear. What I'm hoping they will consider, it doesn't necessarily have to be a condition, is something reflective on the container for at night, because I did not see any lighting in the area that makes it obvious to someone who might be driving around the corner of that building or someone pulling out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lloyd?
I did see in the packet that taxes were due on the 2nd. I did look online. They are paid. So I'm bringing back my taxes are paid. So this is a good thing.
Okay, I'm the confused person here. Is that I thought we were putting containers in commercial areas or for temporary use on some different areas. To me, this is a multifamily residential. And so I'm wondering that. I'm also wondering if you have a 6-foot height fence, why we have a container that is over 10 feet high and visible from the other properties. And I realize that we don't do don't do view corridors. However, this is a container in stick-built project. So I have a question. That's my questions.
Thank you. So while this is a multifamily project, it's the zoning that allows for or does not allow for the placement of the container. So this is zoned general commercial. Being that it's a commercial district, they have the ability to, under the code provisions, request permanent placement at the site. With that, as the staff report outlines, there are requirements painting it a similar compatible color with the development that it's being placed within, reducing the visibility from public rights of way, and that visual screening, either with landscaping or a wall or both, are all those items that are contained within code. So it's really not about the development type, it's about the zoning district. So we just defer to the findings as to whether or not we would say yes to permanent placement.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay, I'd like to have the applicant come up. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Ben Farai. I'm the partner in the project.
Okay, and do you agree to the conditions of use as outlined by the planning department?
I do.
Okay, and do you have any other questions or?
The only comment I make is you sure have a very tough staff, but they are very professional. And I want to thank them for the job they do. It's not an easy job.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, are you going to paint it?
Of course.
No, I mean, as opposed to something else, like put siding on it.
It really is not going to do much more because it's going to wear out. Right now it's metal. It has much more longevity. A right paint.
No, but you could put wooden siding on the side of it so it didn't look like a container. So it looked like a shed.
You can look at it, but
Yeah.
you can look at it. If I'm going to, frankly, have to refer it, given the conditions, to an architect to look at it and see
Okay.
how they think is going to best fit.
All right.
Thank you. And now I have to open it up for public comment. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Denny French, thank you, Chair. I was at the same meeting where there's discussion about sheds and different facades and different methods to blend it into the community for even the temporary times.
Can we talk about?
Oh, okay. The considerations to have it blend in and be appropriate for the areas that it was, I don't find it objectionable. I don't even mind the color, but then I'm not really the decorative type. It's functionality. But in this case, it's not. I'm concerned more about the fact that it's cutting turn areas and visual areas in the areas where people are pulling in and out. But besides that, it's just the double standard here. Those containers were really discouraged in the conversation as a whole, just sort of a blanket thing. And in this consideration, it's going to be permanent, and it does look like a temporary. And so anything that he could do to make it visible to those that are coming and going, a lighting situation, a roof line or such, that would have it look other than the temporary that it does. They're necessities. I appreciate the fact that he has a place to have put it, but every other discussion seemed like we wanted a little bit more out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yep. Seeing none. Bring it back.
Just a question for Heather. Let's just say that he wants to go ahead and do more than just paint it, which is what we're talking about here. But let's say he's doing some siding or doing something a little more that blends in well with the architecture of his apartment complex. Are any of these conditions would stop him from doing that? I don't want to give him a condition that, you know, it's going to like, well, now you can't do something.
There is nothing in the conditions of approval that would disallow him from doing added materials as long as it's consistent with the apartment complex. So that's really a code requirement, is that it be consistent and compatible in color to the complex. So no, there's no conditions that would prohibit that.
I think where I'm kind of confused is that this is, usually we'll have somebody say, I would like to put a container in, not one that says, hi, I've got a big blue container and can I have it? So I think that's where I'm kind of vacillating on this one. Any other questions?
We talked earlier about billboards and maybe sunsetting them instead of a perpetual 5-year, 5-year, 5-year. Billboard is going to last for 7 years or 10 years before it starts to fall apart. Storage container is going to do the same thing. Does it make sense to sunset it? Or at least say that it's got to be swapped out or something?
You had one about 7 years ago. You may remember it. It was the Nugget. And the Nugget had a container on Stewart Street.
Yep.
And he needed to be housing, I think, maybe some slot machines in it. And you all said, okay, but only for this period of time. And then if you need other storage, you figure it out. But for this period of time, you can do it. So you do have a precedent where you've done that.
I just feel like there's lots of changes coming and things like this, and I just don't want to nail ourselves into another perpetual grandfather thing. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I would.
When this container was originally put up here, Mr. Ferrari, when this container was originally put up here, was a temporary to handle the remodel of the apartments? Because I know you did an extensive remodel on the apartments, and didn't you even add a new section in there?
Well, this is not for the new section. We added some apartments in 2017, but the original project, which is the majority, is from early 1970s. So
You know,
those
my
are the
family
ones
used to
that we
own
do.
this complex. This is
I'm
what
sorry?
I know. So I'm kind of going, okay. But I know that
So,
you did add
we're
additional
doing
buildings.
substantial renovation to the older units.
Mhm.
Carpet, flooring, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures.
How long has this been there?
Oh, this been only there a couple of months.
Okay. So it was here as a temporary situation for the
No,
remodels?
nothing is renovation, changing carpet is almost every 2-3 years anymore in the units. That's what the tenants expect. So what we have here is big rolls of carpet. We have cabinet doors. That's why we ask for permanent, because it's going to be ongoing. Once projects get this old, is a continuous, is not something you do and next year you don't need it anymore.
Let's just build a shed.
Yeah, either build a shed or off-site storage. I mean, this is something to me is that this is a complex, it's residential. This is a temporary, it's sitting here and now we want it to make it permanent. And although it may be zoned general commercial, as far as I'm concerned, in my mind, it's still residential. And you're asking us to make it a permanent situation. And I can't really wrap my head around it.
Please consider the fact that it's totally away from public. It is hidden in a corner of the property. It is in line, is already a dentation in the fence that when that put in, you cannot tell, once you put plants in front of it, that you can tell that this even exists. If you take that color away, you're gonna have to look for it to find it. So that's why, and we have extra parking spaces that is waste. We have these containers. This is the only city that requires a special use permit. We have them in other location, never been an issue, frankly.
Commissioner Preston, can I try and ask
Yes,
the
please.
staff a couple questions? So, I mean, based on the conversation we had last week during our, I think that was a workshop, I'm not completely comfortable saying yes to this for perpetuity, but I might be comfortable saying yes to this for a period of time until that is decided. I'm curious how other commissioners feel on what that might look like and if there's comfort in a permanence for a period of time.
Commissioner Christopher?
Commissioner Lloyd just brought that up, and what was coming to my mind is we just had a vote recently with that same conversation about coming up on a master plan review, but that it will take some time. So that's what I'm going back to is, okay, we just had that conversation. How does this applicant's request differ from the previous one that we've already voted on?
My argument is it differs because we actually heard that, and I believe that city staff has said that that's coming back to us within months and not years.
Commissioner Cron?
Yeah, I guess I'm getting a little concerned here. When you start talking about kind of temporary permanent, are we asking him to then make all these improvements, putting a foundation under it, landscaping it, and then we'll think about it in 6 months and tell him no, or to me, if we're going to go down that road, I don't think we should make him do all these improvements until we make up our minds.
And Commissioner Lloyd, for the record, I mean, I would say if we are thinking about temporary, I would say something like paint it for that temporary
Madam
time
Chair,
frame.
if I may, I'd really like the commission to focus on the findings. It's not fair to the applicant to consider potential future regulations. We're working with the regulations we have right now. Now, I think you can look at finding number 2, which talks about the whether the improvements, the on-site improvements are going to have an adverse impact. I don't think this is going to have vehicular issues. You can look at 5, which talks about this particular use meets the purpose statement of the district, and that goes to what the chair's saying, that although zoning's a commercial zoning, it's a multifamily use. I think you can look at the findings, and if you want to accommodate him, you could potentially say, you can have 6 months for temporary or whatever. I don't even know what the code says. Heather knows. But I think we really have to make sure we're looking in the framework of the findings on this. Thank you.
Hope, if we said something like 3 years, and in the course of that 3 years, we change the code. When it comes up for renewal, do we have to renew it with the old code, or can we say, what I'm trying to do is say, all right, well, here it is for 3 years. If we change the code and it gets enforced, 3 years from now, when he comes back for his administrative review, and the code's changed, he must comply with it. If it's sunsetted, it's sunsetted. If it's not, it's not. Is that?
I think you could certainly do that, provided you tie it back to the findings. The other thing, Heather, how long can I authorize? 6 months or?
It's actually 90 days.
I can
So it's
authorize
90 days in one
days.
calendar year.
Okay. So what I'm kind of thinking is what you're trying to do is maybe give him some time with this so that he can find other arrangements. But you're really struggling with the finding. I don't see that the findings are coming easily.
I'm having trouble with finding number 2, but I also appreciate the predicament that he's in.
Sure.
And, it seems like we keep running into projects and requests for people that we know that if what's in the works is ever gets approved, this will or will not be approved. So we're trying to juggle all this. And if I would even say if it went for 5 years, like you said, and just say, is there a way that after that 5 years, instead of saying it's automatically up for administrative renewal, that it can be administratively renewed if it's still in compliance?
Well, I'm wondering, thinking about the billboard, if you kind of do what you did with the billboard. You did the billboard, stop the glare, stop the lights, and come back in a year and we're going to take a look. If he were to paint it, and I think he's offered to paint it, a neutral color, will it disappear? Right now you're staring at this blue thing on the screen, and it's hard to not see this blue thing in a parking lot. And so maybe you give him a chance to paint it, you give him a chance to look at other alternatives, and you take another look at it in a year. Because in 1 year, can you make the findings for a 1 year period and see in a year where things stand?
If I may, the only interjection I would add to that is the building department has a different approach to temporary versus permanent structures. So if this is permanent in nature, and I don't know what the building department definition of that is, it has to be on a foundation. So if we go down a path to identify a timeline, I would recommend modifying condition number 5 to state a building permit to secure a permanent container. That way, if the building department views it as temporary, if a year is temporary, then maybe it wouldn't require the foundation.
Madam Chair? I'm just concerned that this poor applicant is getting caught up into this whirlwind of what we're trying to do. And we're trying to put things upon him because we're not sure about something and we're trying to figure this out. I just don't think it's fair to him. He's here for a simple special use permit request for a container that he's gonna try to make look reasonably decent within his complex. I drove through his complex. He has a quality project. He has a quality project out there. All of his buildings look good. His landscaping looks great. I just feel that he is not the kind of individual, although I don't know him, but just from the product that he's providing for the community, it's a quality product. And I don't think he's gonna want to put something that looks really bad out there. So part of it is, I think, just, so I just have a difficult time trying to put all this on this poor applicant while we're trying to figure stuff out. It's either yes or no. And I think the findings are just fine. So that's kind of where I'm coming down.
I don't have a problem with this, based on what Supervisor Crone said. Here's the rules today. He's following the rules. You know, this application cost him $2,450. I don't want to see him have to come back with another $2,450 to do it again next year. I'm fine with this.
Commissioner Lloyd, for the record, I'm still having trouble finding two.
I'm thinking. I'm fine with, I would approve it as is. And I just want to make one comment because my earlier comment was related to putting something on that container because of it being by the parking. And I say this more for public than I do for those of us who have access and have been looking at all of these. I didn't want to overemphasize that because when I went into that complex and looked around, I had many of the same thoughts that Commissioner Crom had. And I had to look for it, even though there was a diagram. My first thought was, isn't it funny when you see a picture of a blue container? It's like, and then when you drive through the complex and you realize you had a hard time finding it, and then when you find it, it was reasonably set back. They did a nice job to select the area within the parking that had the least amount of impact to their tenants. So, and knowing that we still have this long conversation ahead of us, and I don't even think we were unanimous on it the other night at the workshop, we don't even know where we end up with this. So I think based on the here and the now, I'm in approval for it.
Real quickly, I'll give Commissioner Borders a couple more seconds here. I feel like I would be able to meet finding number 2 if the applicant gave it a different treatment than just paint. Not necessarily a roof, I guess, but a different siding treatment so that from a normal human view and maybe not birds, they would see something that did not look like a shipping container.
Mr. Ferrari, do you own the property next door?
No, we don't.
Okay. This just brings me back to when we had the school, Empire School, in their containers and wanting to have brick walls and so forth so that the neighbors below would not, that were adjacent, would not have any problems. So this is where I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So, I don't know. Commissioner Borders?
If you extended the fence on the property line, can't do an 8-foot fence, so.
It's limited to 6.
Can we do an 8-foot fence?
With all due respect, can I make a comment?
Sure, certainly.
Been in business for 50 years in this beautiful land, in this area. Anything we do it with pride. And end of the day, the only people that are affected here are our tenants. And not a single tenant has come and told us they have an issue with the container, the 2 months that's been there. We would not do anything that would take away from the project, not because of requirement, because that's what the business requirement is. End of the day, is what the customers determine that drives the economy, not regulations. Please keep that in mind, not just in this application, but in every decision you make. I owe that as a duty. The country has been good to me. It's my social responsibility to make that comment. The customer is the driver, not me, and with all due respect, not the regulators. We do a good job because we are in business, and to stay in business and stay competitive that's why we do. We take a pride in what we do.
No, do you have a question? Yes.
This is for Heather. So the adjacent complex, people live there. He doesn't own it, so he doesn't know how they feel necessarily. But did that entire complex receive notifications for this?
So all property owners within a certain radius are notified, so tenants are not, but the property owner for the apartment complex next door was.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
One of the, we're talking about the next door neighbor. From my perspective, you have approximately a 6-foot solid wall. You have a container that'll be painted a neutral color or a color that matches the complex, and you have arborvitae that exists between that wall and the container. Those arborvitae will get anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12 foot tall. So given a few more years, those arborvitae will get to be as tall as the container, if not higher. So from the adjacent property, in my opinion, there's going to be no visual impact. And all they'll see is a 6-foot fence with a bunch of green, evergreen arborvitae sticking up. So they shouldn't even see the container from the adjacent property.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Borders, I'm waiting for him to
No,
finish
go ahead.
thinking. Okay. All right, yeah, if you'd like to try a motion.
I move to approve special use permit LU 2023-356 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
I second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any nays? I'm opposed.
It was 4-2. The opposition was Sina Lloyd and Terry Preston, and Kilgore is not present.
Thank you.
And it's unanimous, so, okay? So,
Thank you very much for your time
welcome.
and consideration, and thanks the staff for your time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we've got it now. Okay, and the next is staff reports.
Right. I feel like we've spent a lot of time together. A lot of you were able to come up to Tahoe to the conference, and I hope you enjoyed that. And we had the workshop, obviously, upcoming. We have 2 items on the agenda, but we're not certain they're complete. There's an escape room and a hotel, so they'd both be SUPs. So we'll see if those get complete and we go ahead with the November meeting. Otherwise, if it's, we'll figure that out.
The November meeting's at an earlier date, but is it still going to be at 5 if we have it?
I'll have Cecilia take a look. If we just have the escape room's in a multi-tenant building. It's kind of like, remember when we had virtual reality in the multi-tenant building? So I think that's probably a really quick item. So we may, if that's ready to go and the hotel's not, I may just poll you guys and see if we can just find a slightly earlier time.
You mentioned an upcoming workshop?
No, I said we had the
Oh,
workshop.
they had the workshop. Okay,
No,
good.
no. We had the marathon workshop. Now I have all the work to do. Okay. So yeah, that's what we've got. We've got 2 items for your next agenda, potentially.
Okay.
And one other thing here real quick, if I might, I did want to thank staff for the opportunity to go to the conference up in Tahoe. I know some of us were there for 1 day, some of us were there for part days, and some of us made it for 2. I don't know if everybody made it for 3, but there were some great sessions. I do appreciate Hope and her team putting that that together for us and getting us up there to broaden our experiences and knowledge base. So just thank you.
And I wanted to also say, Commissioner Cron, I hope you enjoyed the drink tokes. It represented us well. So.
Hopefully you didn't drive down the hill.
Yeah, you got to remember who you're representing. Okay, any other commissioner reports or comments?
I have a comment, and I'm not completely sure how to address it, but as someone obviously have to recuse myself from the process when this item comes up to vote, who's going through all of the different things that a person has to do things in the city, to have a business, I'll just, spoiler, open a daycare, nonprofit, and I sit on a board. It's complicated. And I don't think it has to be easy, but it has to be navigatable. And I think we need to do things to improve the ability to navigate that process. We don't have a lot of staff. The staff we do have is great. I love the Heathers. This particular Heather, I actually worked with when I was at NDOT a long time ago. And so it's not a staff thing. I don't think we have enough staff in planning. Board of Supervisors, if you're listening. But I do think that we need to try to make that process a little bit more navigatable. I don't know the answer to that, but I do want to try to help staff work through that. And I think that the commissioners would also like to see when we have members of the public coming up here spending their hard-earned money, or maybe they haven't quite earned it yet and they're spending all this money to do this, we want to see their success. And so, we want to try to make that process as navigatable as possible.
So that input's helpful, and I know Chairman Preston's we've had conversations with some people she's been working with, and I'll just offer up this for anybody who's maybe watching. I had an interesting conversation with Commissioner Perry. He represented the Rotary, and they were coming in for a special event permit. Well, they applied for their special event like a year before the event, maybe even more than a year before the event. And he said, well, we need to do it well in advance because there's so much planning and so many checks we're writing throughout the year so we can have the event. And he said, but your staff never gives us the permit till the week before the event, even though they have the application a year before. And I went to my staff, I said, why are we not processing this and getting it out the door? They said, well, we have plenty of time. I said, no, they're writing checks for 12 months and they're locking in on contracts and doing things, assuming they're going to get this approval. And they'd like to know when they apply, like, let's do it right away. So they have that box checked and can move on. So, I mean, sometimes there's disconnects that we don't know being in our building, that we need somebody on the outside to say, well, wait, why are you doing it this way? And so I really appreciate your input and Commissioner Preston and everyone else who has an observation that causes us to stop and realize how it looks from the other side, because we definitely want to improve every day.
Well, I think it would be nice if there was some way that we could actually sit down. I mean, even as the Planning Commission could just sit down and review the documents that are given to the public and say, do we get it? Because we're essentially the layman representatives for the community, and that we're looking at it saying, okay, if I was to go through this process, would I understand it?
Actually, maybe in November, since it's going to be probably a light agenda, we do that. We do sort of process stuff with you all, and you poke holes and try to make it user-friendly.
It would be really fun to go through a mock major project review.
Okay, we can definitely. I'll follow up with some of you, and we can certainly, if there's opportunity for process improvement, and if we have time and a venue to do that, let's do it.
That would be great, because I know we have major project review and we have minor. And we have, some people that are doing whole developments, and we have somebody that's putting in a wall and a sink. And I mean, those are two different animals, but they're being addressed as the same. I have another question for you, and this is something else that kind of came up and it, Cena's comment spurred it, is that on several occasions I've been asked, oh, we'll just go to the code, or we refer to the, building code, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and I know that, for instance, I had a question one time several years ago, and I ended up having to purchase the IPM. And the IPM for me to purchase was over $300 and something for me to look up something that said, you can do that, And for somebody that is a layman, they may not, say, it's worth it for me to go ahead and do this. How can I do it? Instead, they just throw up their hands and they say, we can't see this. Is there anything online that people can refer to these different codes or can review the manuals? Because I know that when I was a general contractor in Washington, we had the binders like you have, and we would go through them and look at them, and we had things online, and we knew when the codes changed, and we were able to look at the updates. And it actually made a lot of difference when we were able to look at them and say, okay, is this what we think it means, or is this what it means? So.
And I'm not sure if you were at the workshop when Commissioner Lloyd brought that up, but the Commissioner Lloyd has requested that we provide these, or we work with the library to have any documents that we're enforcing available at the library.
Nope. Then we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much. Oh, public comment. Denny, do you have public comment for us, darling? Well, thank you. James, you don't want to say anything? That is unusual. Okay, thank you. Second.